also a teacher. Teachers are often function as counselors. I think any person who's taught in public schools will testify to that. And in John 3:2, it's a scene where Nicodemus comes to Jesus in the dead of night in secrecy. Remember, Nicodemus was a Pharisee, a teacher, just like Jesus was, who adhered to the law like it was black and white. And he was confused because of what Jesus was teaching. He wanted to believe Jesus. He knew what Jesus was teaching was right, but he didn't understand why. He couldn't let go of what was in himself. He couldn't let go of that Pharisee within. But he said to Jesus, "Rabbi, you have come from God as a teacher. For no one can do these things unless God is with him." You know, that's a pretty good compliment, coming from the group of people that hated Jesus more than any other. You know, granted, at this point, their hatred wasn't quite as tainted as it was a couple of years later. But they still didn't like what he was saying, because he was saying stuff that was different than them. He was teaching contrary to what they had been teaching. But Nicodemus recognized Jesus had this gift to teach. Jesus didn't teach like most people did back then. You know, unfortunately, I'm one of those people that teaches I've got the old school style of teacher in me. Lecture, lecture, lecture. But Jesus didn't teach that way. Jesus got down with the people. He wanted them to think about what he was saying. He didn't want them to just rattle off facts and information. He wanted them to understand it. He wanted it to be a part of their lives, so that they would put it into their lives and live it, and not just know it. One of his favorite methods of teaching was the parable. Generally, he used agricultural imagery. Much of Israel was back then, and still is today, an agrarian economy. Sheep, grapes, oil, olive oil, olives, things like that. Fish. So he used those simple pictures that people understood. And he would tell a story with a moral that was hidden, a moral application that was hidden within. And if you could understand that, you know, he said, "Let those with ears hear and let those with eyes see." What he was saying was the people who God has chosen to step forward and be his true followers, people whose hearts he had opened, would understand this. That's not to say that people who didn't understand it during the time of Jesus' ministry wouldn't ever understand it. They might someday. Their hearts might be open to understanding it. But he wanted the simple person to understand it. It wasn't meant for the people in leadership. It was meant for the people, the favorite saying that we have in today's political world, the grassroots people, the people on the turf, walking the beat, are the ones who were supposed to understand it. And with each parable he told, those who had ears to hear and eyes to see grew an understanding about God and the role of God's chosen people. As a teacher, Jesus caused people to think. God called his people for a specific purpose. Israel lost its way. Christians are losing their way today. We need a shepherd. Who better to shepherd us than Jesus? He is, after all, the good shepherd and the protector of our souls, as Peter wrote in his first epistle, chapter 2. Jesus came to find the lost and bring them back into the fold. Excuse me. Now, if you remember the shepherds today even aren't really highly regarded. It was a pretty low job on the totem pole of social success as they go. I've read in some writings that being a shepherd was not many steps above being the foot washer at a banquet. But you know what? Without the shepherd, Israel's economy at that time, Israel's way of life, would have been in disarray. Because the sheep and the goats and the cattle, the yaks, they would all be running wild. They wouldn't be able to harvest the wool to make clothes, the milk to drink or make cheese, or the meat to eat. Shepherds kept the animals in a close proximity so that they would have all of these things, so that they were available to the people, so that they could provide for the people's needs. As our shepherd, Jesus holds us together. He calls out our names, and we hear his voice, and we come running to him, so that we can be the providers to the people. When God's sheep stray from the flock, as we can see by events in the last 40 years, we have disarray. The world, because of man's bondage to sin, is lost. And without a shepherd, will remain lost. But when Jesus came into this world, his job was to go out and grab the one and bring him back. Knew the 99 would be okay. He was to lead and guide God's children, to help them find a path to safety within the walls of the heavenly kingdom, to safety in the arms of the Heavenly Father. Like David, Jesus was willing to go the distance to make sure even one lost sheep would be saved. That distance was going to the cross.